The event space, so I don't think it's.
It's retired. Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Before I call the meeting to order, I have a brief message to read, and but want to welcome one and all. Generally, we start at 7 o'clock, but our work session with our school board ran over a little bit, and to give council an opportunity to refresh themselves before this meeting, we're starting at 7:05. But I'd like to read, we request that prior notification be given to the city manager or myself, the mayor, for individuals wishing to address council. Public comments are always welcome. I ask in general that you sign up prior to our meeting, and you'll be recognized during the citizens' remarks section of the council's agenda. And there's a sheet over here if you do want to speak at that time. We also have the public hearings for folks that would like to speak during that. We'll call on you, request that you sign up, but we'll get you identified. And when you do come forward, we ask that the following guidelines be followed. Ask that you stand at the podium, and for the record, please state your name and if you are a resident of the city of Lexington, Virginia. If you do want to be contacted after this meeting, please provide your contact information to our clerk, Janie Hostetter. We ask that you make your comments to the council as a whole. We want to hear from you. It's not an opportunity to engage in discussion, but for us to listen and hear what you have to say. We ask that you be brief, state your position, and provide facts. Also, we provide, if you have written statements and supporting materials, we ask that you give those to the clerk for distribution to the council and the city manager. Debate is prohibited. We ask that you speak clearly as we want to hear what you have to say. Generally, we will try and listen to everyone that wants to speak, and we limit those comments to 3 minutes. Time cannot be transferred to another speaker. If you represent a group, you may wish to identify other members of your group who are in attendance, and groups have a extended time of 5 minutes. I remind us all that the meetings of the Lexington City Council are formal proceedings and are recorded. And with that, I would like to go ahead and call our meeting to order. And the first item, if you all will please stand and join me for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Again, thank you very much. Those of you who are Washington Lee students, welcome. I'm not sure which teacher victimized you for being here, but we are glad you're here. All the council members and the mayor and city manager and city attorney's emails are all on our website. And since you all are likely toting phones or laptops, I encourage you to reach out if you have questions or concerns. You can certainly grab us after the meeting as well. There is a section later in the meeting when we have you all stand and introduce yourselves and your majors. Just kidding. Hope that you enjoy. Just want to see who's paying attention. The first item, I would like to offer a proclamation establishing November 1st as 2024 as Extra Mile Day in Lexington. And with that, also want to recognize I had the opportunity to attend the 30th anniversary of the founding of the Sunrise Rotary Club in Lexington. I think the original Rotary Club in Lexington just celebrated their 100th anniversary, and the Sunrise Group just recognized theirs last night as their 30th. There were two things that I walked away that I wanted to share with everyone this evening and remind people of a great thing that Rotary represents, their motto, and a four-way test of the things we think, say, or do. And these are directly from Rotary. Number one, the first question in the test, is it truth? Number two, is it fair to all concerned? Number three, will it build goodwill and better friendships? And number four, will it be beneficial to all concerned? All of those are, if you will, a question or test that Rotary approaches to all the things that they think and say or do. And I think it's a fine thing for all of us to consider and encourage you to embrace that. And also to embrace Rotary's motto of service above self. I always love to acknowledge the professionalism and preparedness that this city council brings every 2 weeks when we meet, and every day that they serve as elected officials for our community. This proclamation for the Extra Mile Day in Lexington will be submitted to the organization that I believe operates out of California. But the proclamation reads as follows. Establishing November 1st, 2024 as Extra Mile Day in Lexington, Virginia. Whereas Lexington, Virginia is a community which acknowledges that a special vibrancy exists within the entire community when its individual citizens collectively go the extra mile in personal effort, volunteerism, and service. And whereas Lexington, Virginia is a community which encourages its citizens to maximize their personal contribution to the community by giving of themselves wholeheartedly and with total effort, commitment, and conviction to their individual ambitions, family, friends, and community. And whereas Lexington, Virginia is a community which chooses to shine a light on and celebrate individuals and organizations within its community who go the extra mile in order to make a difference and lift up fellow members of their community. And whereas Lexington, Virginia acknowledges the mission of Extra Mile America to create 550 extra mile cities in America and is proud to support Extra Mile Day on November 1st, 2024. Now, therefore, I do hereby proclaim November 1st, 2024 to be Extra Mile Day. I encourage each individual in our community to take time on this day to not only go the extra mile in his or her own life, but to also acknowledge all those who are inspirational in their efforts and commitment to make their organizations, families, community, country, and world a better place. Adopted the 17th day of October, 2024, and this will be submitted to the Extra Mile Foundation, and along with it, wanted to recognize 3 individuals that I was allowed to select. There are a multitude of folks that go the extra mile in our community, but 3 that I wanted to recognize to send in with this proclamation are the following. Jen Bell, our finance director, who as interim city manager and has supported the city manager in getting off to a great start and having us in a great position budget-wise. Mr. Alex Miller, who achieved his Eagle Scout rank last month and sets a great example for scouting and for youth in our community. And lastly, Karen and Dan Lyons, who have committed their lives pretty much to the service of our community in Lexington and Rockbridge County. Karen as a medical doctor and Dan as a doctor superintendent of our city schools for a number of years. And most recently, they have traveled to Damascus to help the people who have been impacted by the flooding and helping people get funding for their homes that don't exist, have a tree through the middle of it, and cars that have been washed away. So the stories that they shared with me and the work that they've done is very inspirational. So when you have the opportunity and see those folks, I encourage you to congratulate them on going the extra mile and all they do for our community. Next item on the agenda is consideration of the agenda. And don't know if any council members have any modifications or changes. Unless there's an objection, I would like to move item 15.1, the Jordan's Point Park Improvements Update, under presentations, and let Patrick present to this room full of people all the great things going on at Jordan's Point. And if there's no objection to that, we will approve the agenda as presented with that modification. It is approved. With that, I'll call on Patrick, and if you come on up and lead the charge. Patrick, welcome.
Good evening. Do you have? Yes, it was the last item. I think they had a hyperlink on. Well, we find the hyperlink for you. I believe you have the chart or pretty much the cartoon that we have that has basically the color coding of the various improvements and efforts. You know, in previous years, obviously we had a walk down at Jordan's Point, and between Arnie and previous city manager Jim and myself, we came up with improvements, showed you those improvements and or suggested improvements, and there was enthusiasm to move forward. You gave us a budget, and so as you can see on the chart before, in the past, good portion of it was red, yellow, green. Happy to report that it's half green and half yellow. And primarily, we've been able to accomplish a lot in-house, out in contracts, out in the community, doing both asphalt, concrete work, using our on-hand contractor to do the sidewalks. We've been able to improve and get another shelter. As we shared, our shelters are continuously used and continuously booked, and definitely a feature that the community enjoys and utilizes. And so we also obviously got the assisted with getting in the Gold Star Memorial in that same vicinity. We improved the handicap and ADA accessibility within the park, adding several ADA spots, both in the middle of the park, but also to the parking lot by the shelters themselves. We did fender improvements throughout the entrance coming into the park. We've changed the one trail, so now it's accessible, ADA accessible, that takes you down towards the Veterans Bridge. And we've also been able to put in the middle, the little bull ring. We've been able to get our gardeners to plant species for butterflies. And if you go down there, I was down there today, and there's several still flying around. So that's been a nice little feature, which was part of that LPDA plan that had been done back in 2018. So we were able to kind of incorporate that, minus the promenade or plaza, but at least still having some of those features coming into the park. We've also had a lot of the community come and help with our new arborist, Ray Ulrich, with the tree board as well, and Boxerwood and several WNL students helped, as well as from our school system itself. We got a lot of plantings done, about 120 saplings put in, trying to do understory trees, mainly orientals. We'll see how those take, but we've also put some protection on some of those as well down through there. So we had some rollover of funds from last year. You plus this up in the new budget year. And so primarily what we're going to be working on or focusing on here, looking at the diagram, is the access road realignment, and then also the tiered bench seating down by the water next to the dam, and an ADA trail to bring you down to the water itself too, which will lend itself to folks that want to sit by the river, or maybe it might lend itself to some musical events where people can sit, but be very similar to drive-in theater type of, just sort of seating going down towards the river. Both of those are in design right now. They're at about the 50% mark. AECom is doing that design for us. You saw the concepts or visions of them last year, which were more or less the 35%. And now we're getting them working towards 100%, so we can have contract documents and design drawings to then go out and solicit and bid. It's a little bit beyond our wheelhouse to do in-house within Public Works, but we'll have that on the street. Anticipation is in early spring, and we'll see where bids come in with what funds we do have on hand. Subject to any questions, that kind of is the update, just to show you where we're at on the diagram itself. Yes, ma'am.
When we last talked about this in the tiered area, have you decided whether to add an electric outlet in that area anywhere? Is it possible?
It is possible. We didn't have it in the plans, but it is possible to bring it over. It is in the center where the drive aisle is, so we can look at extending that.
What's the yellow box kind of in the middle of all the green? It's like a small little box.
Yeah, that was an error. That should have been
Okay.
on there. Probably at one point we had that showing the Gold Star Memorial,
Okay.
which
yeah.
is a little further
Completed,
back. Yeah.
When the access road goes in,
Yes, ma'am.
will the other road just be a path?
Yes,
That's what
exactly.
I thought, okay.
The plans, what we'll do is kind of lock it off with bollards. And then at the other end, where the service road will be realigned, it'll be sort of a dead end where it won't connect in to the boat ramp itself. So we'll truncate it back further.
Okay.
And yeah, the idea we'd have kind of removable bollards. So if there was a need to, for whatever reason, some kind of access, but at least limit the vehicle exactly and have it such that it can be pedestrian and kind of make that whole area sort of the river access foot traffic.
That's great. Thanks.
Yes, ma'am.
Other questions members of council have? Hearing none, Patrick, thank you for being with us. And thanks for the great work where the parking has been cleaned up and delineated. Looks fantastic. The cleanup in the mill race, the tree removal, it's really taking shape and it's exciting. It's always exciting to go to Jordan's Point, but even more so as it comes to life. And so thank you for your efforts and the things underway. Look forward to the additional projects as they come to fruition.
Thank you for funding it. Thanks.
Patrick, before you go, can I just quickly make a quick comment, a little out of sorts here, but just to personally uplift Public Works for the work that you all do when a lot of us are asleep. On Monday, my daughter happened to be up early, going to a sunrise hike at 6 a.m. As she approached Main Street by the Mayflower, the red light must have been out, the lights, the traffic. She called me and she was, if I can do anything about it, but she called me and she's like, the red light's not working. You know what? She's a new driver. It was at 6:07 a.m. I emailed Scott Dameron, our deputy director of public works, and I said, hey, the red light's not working. And so a little bit of time went by, and at 7:30 in the morning, just about an hour and a half later, I was going to work and the red lights were working. And I thought, oh, shoot, I gave you bad info. Like I sent the email, I said that they were broken. And so I sent an apology email at 7:30 saying, I must have given you bad info. And you had fixed it already. In less than an hour and a half, Public Works was dispatched, fixed the red light so that the Monday morning rush hour traffic, if you will, in Lexington, did not have to encounter traffic lights not working on Main Street. So just want to give you thanks and take that back to your team. We
Appreciate it.
live
You
in a
got it.
great community.
Thank you.
Thanks again, Patrick. Next time on the agenda is the Rockbridge Area Community Services Update. Welcome, Kim Shaw.
I would like a round of applause when I'm done as well. please. So I believe most of you know me. I've presented before, but for those that don't, I'm Kim Shaw. I'm the executive director with Rockbridge Area Community Services. We provide substance use, behavioral health, developmental disability, and prevention services in the Rockbridge, Lexington, Buena Vista, and Bath communities. We also provide 24/7 emergency services, which tends to be what a lot of people obviously know us for in the community. We provide those services through a number of methods. We do individual and group therapy. We have medication assisted treatment. We provide case management. We have day programs, both for those with mental health issues and those with intellectual and developmental disabilities. That is a mouthful. I usually use the acronym IDDD. So maybe I'll do that. It'd be easier. In fiscal year 23, we started providing peer services, and I believe I mentioned that last year. Peer services are individuals that have lived experience that help others navigate the system, whatever that might be. One of our probably most notable peers is Hugh Ferguson. He does our veteran peer services. And every month they have a veteran breakfast at the VFW. And then in August, they had a dinner at Natural Bridge Hotel, which I believe we had about 100 people in attendance. Unfortunately, I wasn't able to be there, but Mutts with a Mission came in. that's another one of our peers. So Ellen Wheeler and Rain are also part of our staff now. Both Ellen and is she a service dog? Facility dog. The terms are very specific and I have to get them right. So she's a facility dog. She's probably our most well-known employee. Um, people love Rain. But she came from Mutts with Mission. So it was a combination effort of those two peer programs for the dinner at Natural Bridge Hotel. It was a big success. Last year in fiscal year 24, which ended June 30th, we served 163 unique clients from the city of Lexington. That's about 10% of our service population, which is pretty much on target with what we expect. Of those, 37 were emergency services. And emergency services could range anything from an ECO, someone being brought in by law enforcement, to crisis counseling. Somebody walks in for specific assistance with just an issue they might have, and our emergency team's able to work with them and help them work through that. So one of the things that I like to point out, one of the things that I'm most proud of that we do at the community services is collaborate. And we collaborate with so many people and agencies within the community. We work with law enforcement. We work with our schools. We work with DSS. I'm going to forget somebody, the health department, hospital, state parks, hospice. So we prefer collaboration to competition. We do a lot of referral over to Rockbridge Area Health Center if we have individuals in need of a service that we can't provide, things of that nature. So just to give you an idea of some things that we have going on that are new, that are exciting for me and for you all as City Council. This year, we have established the therapeutic day treatment program at Waddell Elementary School. So that is new. They've been, and our director of prevention, behavioral health and prevention worked with Rebecca Walters and the school system to get that program in there. I think they've been wanting that for a while. So if you have individuals, children that participate in the TDT program, the therapist, the clinician is able to help them with behaviors in the classroom and within their school day. So in theory, this can hopefully help keep some young individuals in school that might not otherwise stay in school for the school day. The other thing that we have implemented this year for the city schools is a program called Catch My Breath, and that's through our prevention department. And it is a program on vaping and tobacco use. And that's going to be utilized with the 6th grade at Lilburn Downing. I'm not sure if she has started that program yet, but that is new this year as well. So that's very exciting. Another thing that happened this past year that I am excited to report about, our Magnolia players came back to the stage. They had been absent since 2019. So Magnolia players is part of the Magnolia Center, which is our day support program for the IDDD population. And every year they put on a show, a Christmas spectacular, if you will. It's 2 days usually. And they love for people to come watch them. And they do such a great job. They do all of it. And so if you see information come out about that this year and you have an opportunity to come visit and watch them perform, I would highly encourage it because it's heartwarming. The other thing that we had our prevention forum this year. We have prevention forum every year. And that is one way that we're able to connect and share about relevant issues with the community and the youth. So it's really geared more toward parents and educators and the adult community to come and be part of and hear kind of things that are going on with the youth, what the youth might be experiencing or exposed to. I think the sheriff's department came with their Hidden in Plain Sight. This year in particular, we had Lauren Sisler, who is an ESPN reporter, came and did, she gave her testimony. So it was it was a great day. It was attended. I think we probably had about 100 in attendance that day as well. So it was a very good day. Our prevention team also continues to provide community trainings. They do ACEs, which is adverse childhood experiences. They do mental health first aid for youth and adult. They partner with VDH to provide Revive trainings and to be able to provide Narcan. So when I tell you that we've got a lot going on, we have a lot going on in a lot of different areas. But I think that we do a great job. We do still have some staffing challenges here and there. But we are doing some out of the box thinking, trying to find some ways to resolve those because they are unfortunately with our therapy and outpatient services. So again, trying to just do some out of the box thinking to try and resolve those so that we don't have wait lists. But I think those are like the big picture exciting things that we have going on. I'm happy to answer any questions or try to. And if I don't have the answers this evening, I'll be glad to bring them back to you.
Excellent, Kim. Thank you. Mr. Alligood.
About staffing, you
Yes.
mentioned just now about staffing. What level of staffing percentage wise are you now? Or how many openings do you have and how many would you normally have?
So the outpatient therapy department, we have 2 openings. But 2 openings, when you're talking about individual therapy, can be a pretty big deal. If you have somebody that, you figure a therapist can probably see 5 to 6 people per day. And then you have 2 openings that's a pretty good wait list that you could potentially have going. We actually, in many of our programs, we are not short staffed and we're actually doing quite well in the majority of our programs. It's just some of those that are probably most notable and most talked about in the local area that we end up with shortages, which is therapy. And I know that many of our local therapists that are private providers are also full. It's just an unfortunate, it's multi-pronged. I don't have a good answer for exactly why that is. I know since COVID, there's a lot more need for mental health services, and there are fewer providers to give it.
And one of the things that I think I recall you talking about at a prior time that you came to share with us information was remote employment. Are you all still doing that? Has that changed? What's the story on the remote?
We do still offer telework for our staff. And many of our staff do take advantage of that. It's not fully remote. We have staff that work 2 to 3 days remote, and then they're either 2 to 3 days in the office. We are actually looking to establish some telehealth services for therapy. So that's one of the solutions that we're looking at.
Approximately how many remote workers are there? Or percentage wise, half, a fourth, just some idea.
Quarter maybe have the option to work remotely.
It's kind of a hybrid model where you said they got.
Right. It's not completely remote. Like again, they're in and out of the office.
Right, part and part is what.
Yes.
I was just curious about that. Since you had mentioned it at a previous meeting, I was wondering if there are fewer remotes now than there were, or more, or about the same.
We intend to stick with that model. We like the hybrid model. It works for a lot of our case management staff, especially. So case management, support coordination. It seems to work for them. If they have notes, they can be home, and sometimes it's a lot easier to get things done when you're not in the office. So we don't actually intend to do away with that model. But it really is up to each individual supervisor, and it's based upon the employee and whether they're a good fit for remote work.
Thank you for the information.
You're welcome. Thank you.
Suffice to say, you all are flexible with your staff and trying to figure out the best circumstance to provide the services.
We are, yeah. What we do is family, so we take
Excellent.
care of ours.
Good. Good. Other questions for members of council? Hearing none, I would ask that you please notify the clerk of the schedule of the Magnolia performers. Having attended, people hearing it for the first time have no idea what we're talking about, but if they can see the smile on your face and the smile on my face, it is one of the most precious, beautiful scenes you'll ever see in your life. So I encourage people to embrace that. And thank you for the work that you do, that you persevered while you were not in the best of health. You look great. Congratulations on leading the team and doing such great work for folks in our community that need the support.
Thank you. Thank you all. I appreciate the support.
I'm gonna give you
It's not a bad tradition to start. Next item on the agenda, downtown parking enforcement. And I'm not sure exactly who's here to present, but if you can introduce yourselves and welcome one and all.
You. Thank you for having us this evening. I'm Suzanne Marichek, CEO of Walkabout Outfitter, a local business, and I'm not a city resident anymore.
I'm Jess Reed. I'm owner of Lex Running Shop, and I wrote the letter that you're about to read. I'm not a city resident, county.
And my name is Red Dowdell. I own Rockbridge Barbell here in town, and I am a city resident.
Thank you.
So again, thank you all for having us this evening. And really, this is maybe less of a presentation, but more of a concern and request from each and every one of you all. But the three of us are here tonight representing the Parking Enforcement Committee, which was created locally by local business owners and employees. And we just have experienced similar frustrations with the lack of parking enforcement. We are extremely grateful for the time that many of you have already given. We've had meetings, we've had conversations, you've listened to our concerns, and we appreciate that. We're seeing Reggie out there more, and we appreciate that. But quite frankly, we're just still not convinced it's this increased parking enforcement is here to stay. We've been here before addressing the same thing and asking for the same level of priority, putting it at the same, higher level of priority that we are. So numerous business owners have voiced these concerns about lack of consistent parking enforcement as far back, maybe 2, 3, 4 years. Many of the business owners have heard the same explanations and obstacles from the city. And that was over this course of time. It just feels from our perspective that the priority of parking enforcement is just not there. And it's not necessarily a priority of you all's. It's fantastic to see, again, Reggie out there more often now. But again, our concern is that's going to fall back to the wayside and become less of a priority. So we're just here tonight to reiterate how critical it is that consistent parking enforcement should be a priority. Our economy depends on it. Your tax revenue depends on it. And so does our community and the visitors that come and our customers. The concern really started mainly with our customers coming in, reporting that it's so frustrating, I can't find parking. I see some of the same people or same cars parking for all day long in a 2-hour parking. So ensuring that 2-hour spots are being used for their designated purpose guarantees greater access to downtown stores and restaurants. When vehicles occupy those 2-hour spaces for all day long, that parking spot fails to operate as it's intended, deterring customers rather than inviting them. We are worried for the future of the parking in Lexington. I think that if parking enforcement isn't taken seriously and the increase in parking enforcement doesn't remain consistent, we will have a big problem in Lexington, particularly later on the docket tonight. And a good segue is the problem with the Rockbridge building and it being, it's becoming 30 office spaces. So our big question is, where are those 30 employees going to park? From the behind that building, there were 10 spaces designated for employee parking, but that's been demolished in the construction. So that takes away even their personal parking. So the big question is, where are they going to park? And then, of course, in the future of the decision of the Grand Piano building, what will happen with that? And if that becomes more office spaces, again, later, I think you're going to hear about that. It could majorly impact the parking situation in Lexington. and deterring even more visitors, more customers coming in, shopping locally, supporting their businesses. Increasing parking turnover will ensure that customers can visit downtown and spend money downtown, increasing sales for local businesses and increasing sales tax revenue for the city. Certainly, we absolutely respect all that LPD does and what Reggie is doing to assist our businesses already. We're just simply requesting that parking enforcement continues to happen consistently and to help our community thrive and uphold the parking laws already in place. When business owners feel the burden to monitor those parking behaviors, that creates an inappropriate and somewhat toxic downtown environment. If the responsibility was appropriately placed and consistently on our officers to maintain parking regulations, business owners wouldn't have to stand up and focus their attention towards cultivating their businesses and nurture. Or what we want to do is focus on cultivating our businesses and nurturing positive connections in our community. So again, it's just more of a matter of, we would like you to take this as a request to keep that parking enforcement at the forefront and as a priority in the city of Lexington. And we really appreciate your attention. We do have a copy for everybody of the letter that we did write, and we do have some signatures from other businesses in support.
Excellent. Thank you so much for being with us and for presenting this information. Jess, I see you in your good looking shoes coming from the parking deck. So complying with the parking rules and regs, and encourage people, if they have uncomfortable shoes, a great way to get to and fro would be to stop in your shop. So
To the parking garage, they might as well get a good shoe.
exactly. So
More steps.
exactly. Indeed. All part of the health wellness of our community as well. So greatly appreciate you all coming together as a group to present this information to City Council. I know there's some efforts already afoot, and unless council has any objections, we'll ask the city manager to continue to see this through and offer response this evening if he's so inclined.
Sure. Thank you, Mayor, and thank you for coming. We do monitor parking enforcement activity. There was a dip in enforcement activity over the summer. I'm still looking into why exactly that is. Won't offer an explanation or an excuse. Understand the concern about consistency and the importance of consistency. So this has our full attention, and I appreciate you bringing the concern and look forward to working with you in partnership. We did meet with the Downtown Merchants. Council Member Smith was there, as well as Chief Green and Reggie Turner as well, and Lieutenant Condry. So we want to make sure that the business owners, if you are frustrated, our emails are available on our website. And I think I gave a couple of you my business cards, and I'm available not that far from your business. So we're here to help, and just let us know when we're not quite meeting the expectations, not asking you to do our job, but inviting you to let us know when we can do better, because you have eyes on the street.
Thank you, Tom.
I did just have a question for you, folks. You all mentioned the city of Stanton. Did y'all have any data from Stanton in terms of that was comparable, or just curious why?
So I called the city of Stanton, their parking department, just to inquire, to know. I mean, I don't know if you've been to Stanton before.
I'm there
I
quite a
have
bit.
many times, and their downtown is very similar to ours, and it's lovely and it's vibrant, and there's cross streets, but the parking downtown is also like ours. It's 2 hours. And so I was curious to know, how are they enforcing that? All the times I've been there, it seems to be working. And the gentleman I spoke to said that their system was one man on foot marking cars by hand, and their system worked great. He said that it brought in quite a bit of revenue from the tickets.
Okay.
And that it was a workload that seemed to be manageable. So I found that interesting, because I was told that our system, which we've been using, is not manageable for the officer. So that was where the Stanton bit came in.
Thank you.
Of course.
I feel you. Having been a downtown merchant, and as the city manager said, I did attend that meeting and then empathize with your issues and your causes. I did, and I left you a note, Jess. I hope you got
I
it.
saw your note. Thank you. Both your notes.
One of the results of that meeting that the chief brought up was there's a cadet that's on staff that's going to be helping our parking enforcement officer with more consistent enforcement. So things are happening already for the public to hear. So we're making steps, and I take it as seriously as anybody else. Thank you.
Thank you. Yeah, thank you.
Any other council members, comments, questions? Hearing none, thank you again for being here. Thank you for running the vibrant businesses that you do and the contributions to our community. We don't delineate county, city, except for knowing where to contact you. So.
Okay,
but-
we know we don't have a gold star by our names.
Thank you all for being here.
Thank you for your time.
Next item on the agenda, public hearings. First is item 6.1, public hearing and consideration to renew a 2009 conditional use permit. And I will call on city planner to introduce this subject. As he's approaching, for the benefit of the students, public hearings come about and are a requirement for different zoning issues typically. It could be a variety of issues. In the circumstances, the staff gives a presentation. We have a public hearing where members of the public are able to comment and present their ideas and thoughts and information to council so that we can listen to their concerns. And the applicant also has an opportunity to address those concerns and questions and present. And then council will have discussion and consider the issue with some type of vote. So stay tuned. Take it away, Arnie.
Hold on.
Oh.
Yeah, sorry.
Yeah.
We have a few.
Have folks that would like to make some comments, council members?
Sure, I'll start. I have a conflict disclosure in accordance with Virginia Code 2.2-3112A and B and 2.2-3115H. I declare that I have a personal interest in the city of Lexington City Council's consideration of conditional use permit 2024-02. And is it okay if I combine the two? And conditional use permit 2024-05 because of my spouse's employment with Washington and Lee University, 204 West Washington Street, Lexington, Virginia, 24450. Washington and Lee University has a leasehold interest in the property that is the subject of the conditional use permit application, which is identified for the first one at tax map number 23-1-194, and for the second CUP at tax map number 23-1-72A. I am not disqualified from participating in this transaction because I'm a member of a group of 3 or more who are affected by the transaction, and I can participate in the transaction fairly, objectively, and in the public interest.
I'll direct this to the attorney. Should I, for the record, repeat everything that was?
Adopt it as long as you, with a little explanation that it applies. Same reason with the spouse and that.
So my statement is exactly the same, but just the signature at the bottom is different. So would you prefer that I? Okay.
Form over substance. You're disclosing that you have the same conflict.
Correct.
That you can participate.
And I can participate in the transaction fairly objectively and in the public interest.
I will go ahead and also disclose that I would have a personal interest in both CUP applications due to my spouse's employment with Washington Lee University. Because I'm a member of a group of 3 or more who are affected by this transaction, I can participate in both transactions fairly, objectively, and in the public interest.
And then you sign those and give them to Janie and she'll put them in the public record.
And again, for the benefit of the students, as well as anyone who may be with us for the first time, other folks on council do not have a conflict of interest related to these items because it involves Washington and Lee. So thus the reason we're not reading statements that we have a conflict, but we're still going to participate. But I think now, unless there's anything else I'm forgetting, Arnie, take it away.
Good evening to you all. If you don't mind, I'm going to read the statement in the record as opposed to what I normally do. The concurrent conditional use permit was approved in 2009 for the private school use and for the assembly hall use, and the approval was for 15 years. Unlike many conditional use permits that were historically placed on renewal periods for control over a use, the 15-year approval for the courthouse mirrored a deed restriction. The county sold the property to Rockbridge Partners LLC with a deed stipulation that either the old circuit courtroom or the lobby and former record room be made into a meeting room to be made available for a period of 15 years for use by Rockbridge County Board of Supervisors and Lexington City Council or other public groups subject to additional approvals. The 2009 conditional use permit allowed the assembly hall and private school uses in only those two rooms. The assembly hall use is now called a public assembly in the updated zoning ordinance, and the private school use is now called an educational facility, college, university use, which is a bit of a mouthful, admittedly. Public assembly, by the way, is a conditional use that allows a number of people to gather in a space, and it does not mean the general public has automatic access to the space in question. This was a confusing point during the planning commission meeting that I did not address adequately. An educational facility, college, university use is listed in the use matrix as a conditional use in the C1 zoning district, and any university-related use meeting any portion of that definition must contain a conditional use permit through the public hearing process, which is exactly what we're doing this evening. The educational facility, college, university use was added in 2017, and it includes facilities associated with the educational institution. And the new definition reads as follows. This is in your packet, of course. An educational facility, college, university is an educational institution authorized by the Commonwealth of Virginia to award baccalaureate or higher degrees, associate, baccalaureate, or higher degrees and facilities associated with it. This term includes academic buildings, administrative facilities, dormitories, special housing, parking areas, dining halls, and other physical plants associated with college or university use. You'll notice that the administrative facilities in that particular part of the definition is underlined because that is what we're dealing with in both of the conditional use permits this evening. The old courthouse building contains W&L administrative office space throughout the building, with the exception of a meeting room on the main level to the rear of the building that is referred to as the old record room or as the old vault room. There are two conditions that were approved in 2009, and they are as follows. Number one, that only the courtroom or the vault room be utilized for private school or assembly purposes. The determination of which space will be used for this purpose is to be determined by the applicants. And number two, that this conditional use permit be issued for a period of 15 years. Now that the 15 years has expired, the applicant seeks to renew the conditional use permit and specifically requests three things. Number one, that condition number one, allowing the courtroom or the vault room to be utilized for educational facility, college, university use, or for the public assembly purposes remains in effect. Number two, that the remainder of the building may be utilized for administrative facilities related to the educational facility, college, university use, and that's the office space that's currently in the building. And last, the conditional use permit be granted in perpetuity without a renewal period. The requested amendments to the original conditions are shown in strike through and underlined on page 9 of your overall packet. You will notice the administrative office use occurred in the building prior to the definition changing in 2017 when we had the major update to the zoning ordinance. And this administrative office use is therefore considered a non-conforming use that is allowed to continue, although it cannot be expanded. The applicant prefers to codify this administrative office use while he is in the process of renewing the overall conditional use permit. Since at least 2016, staff has recommended conditional use permits not include a renewal period because there's a mechanism already baked into the zoning ordinance to revoke a conditional use permit that is not adhering to the approved conditions. In addition to the conditions for issuance for a conditional use permit that are found on pages 9 and 10 of your overall packet, and with which you are intimately familiar as you utilize these conditions for issuance of every conditional use permit that you review. Staff would like to point out that any conditions imposed or approved with a conditional use permit must be reasonable and address an expected impact from the proposed use. Additionally, conditions developed to address an expected impact must be proportionally related to the impacts resulting from the use. Staff therefore cannot recommend the 15-year renewal period that was recommended by the Planning Commission because staff cannot determine what the expected impact may be from the administrative office use or the public assembly use that warrants a 15-year renewal period. Furthermore, it should be mentioned that were the administrative office use in the building not related to a university, that office use would be a by right use and not subject to a conditional use permit. Planning Commission held 2 meetings, and minutes from those meetings are included in your packet beginning on page 11 of your overall packet. The appendix contains comments from the public beginning on page 16. And you also received an additional email today from Patrick Ramey with additional comments. That's all I have for presentation. Happy to answer any questions.
Thank you, Arnie. Members of council have any questions for
Could you
staff?
explain again why a 15-year limit was put on the CUP by the Planning Commission?
Originally, I just made the assumption that it was a typical renewal period like we have had for a lot of conditional use permits. But this one is simply to mirror a deed restriction. So when the building was sold from the county to Adamson Development or the actual Rockbridge Partners LLC, there was a request or a restriction that stipulated that a meeting room be made available to the Board of Supervisors and the City Council and others if they went through a certain process. And that requirement was there for a 15-year period only.
But why did the Planning Commission recommend 15 years in the renewal?
It was more about control, thinking that future Planning Commission should have potential review over this particular use. And then also one particular comment was about, well, what if the market changes and perhaps retail is more appropriate or more desired in some point in the future. So it was more about control.
But like you said, since 2016, 2017, we haven't put an end date on any CUPs. Is that right?
Correct. Our recommendation has been not to do that because it takes up resources from the person having to apply for the conditional use permit, from staff, and just overall your time as well. There is already a mechanism in the zoning ordinance for enforcement that if the conditional use permit is found to not be in compliance with the approved conditions, then that conditional use permit can be revoked through a process, but it can be revoked.
This is being brought because the 15-year period expired. There hasn't been any change in the actual use of this facility. Is that right?
That is correct.
And it's also because some of the terminology changed.
We did change a lot of the terminology in the 2016, 2017 update. So the assembly hall went to public assembly and the private school went to that longer definition. Yes, ma'am.
Other questions from council? You'll have another opportunity if you like after the public hearing. Arnie, thank you. This time I'd like to open the public hearing and invite anyone who would like to speak on this topic. And again, to identify, this is item 6.1 exclusively. We will take up 6.2 in a short while. Some people have signed up for that. No one has signed up to speak at 6.1, but is there anyone who would like to speak to this issue? Skip, come on up. If you could state your name for the record, please. Thanks for being
with us. My name is H.E. Ravenhorst. I'm an architect. I live in Rockbridge County. Was born in Lexington and I work in Lexington right across the street from the old courthouse. And I guess it was 15 years ago, I was on the Citizens Committee to determine what to do with the old courthouse when a new one was built. And it was very problematic. We met numerous times and it didn't look like there was anything that was going to work out. But Mr. Adamson came along with his plan, his harebrained scheme to rent it to Washington and Lee. And we said, okay, fine, go ahead. And it's worked out great. I think they've been a wonderful neighbor. And I want to encourage you to renew the COP.
Thank you,
Thank you.
sir. Thank you for being with us. Is there anyone else who would like to speak to this item? Hearing none, I'd like to close the public hearing on 6.1 at 7:59 and see what discussion and or consideration from council.
I'll just make a comment. Just, I guess, repeating what Skip just said. I think I was on the HLF board at the time. And after the county moved the courthouse to the new location and the old location sat vacant, golly, for at least a year. It was becoming an eyesore. It was becoming, it was impacting the downtown business district negatively. I don't know if John has any harebrained ideas, but this was a solid one, and I'm glad it's worked out as well as it has for as long as it has. It's been a great addition and to the downtown district, and what has happened there is a positive thing.
Thank you, Mr. Smith. Mr. Adamson is the applicant. If you'd like to make any comments, not required to, but welcome your.
Make it just a few quick, Mr. Mayor, members of council, Mr. Carroll. John Adamson. Two quick comments. One, this is fairly nuanced, but when Arnie first sort of brought this forward, that we had a conditional use permit that was set to expire, and what did we want to do? The meeting room has been a great community resource that's been available for meetings. I've used it. I know that other community groups have used it. And so it seems silly to take that away. And then in the conversation that ensued, we had go with me on this, but legal non-conforming use for the building since the ordinance had changed. And I said, I don't want to be legal non-conforming. I want to be conforming. And so he said, this is what we need to do to bring this forward. And so it was with the best of spirits to sort of honor the current rules and regulations in place that this came forward. And that's sort of how we ended up here. Planning Commission did send this out with a 15-year time limit, if memory serves. My ask of you would be, I feel like it would make more sense just to give the approval with the conditional use moving forward without the time limit, since that's what staff is recommending. Additionally, if it's no longer used by this use for a period of 2 years, I believe, then the conditional use goes away and we have to come back before you if that's in fact the case. But I want to be a good neighbor. The spirit of this was good natured, and that's all I have. Any questions for me?
I have a question about the 15 years, and without divulging, I guess, terms of leases, if that's not public, but if in 15 years, the conditional use permit, you came back to renew it again, and if we said no, or if I won't be here, but if whoever's sitting here said no, does that violate the terms of a lease that might, let's just say the lease has 20 years left on it, and all of a sudden city council is forcing you to break a lease, and does that cause legal issues that may not be?
I'm no lawyer, but
Yeah.
what I would say is the initial conditional use coincided with an initial lease term.
Okay.
And that's where the 15 years originated from. And then census staff has said they've removed the time requirement. Does that answer the question? That was the initial spirit. So moving forward, it's kind of harder to say exactly. And I don't remember off the top of my head exactly when the lease.
Okay. Yeah. Again, like I said, I'm not trying to get into your personal terms of a lease. I just would I need to just acknowledge if you have 20 years left on a lease to your tenant and city council says, nope, the lease ends in 15 years, you have to break a lease because of a political body not renewing a CUP. And if that just sends, puts you in an odd position, and so on.
So there are two issues. One, and I don't want to conflate the two, but the conditional use was trying to codify, as Arnie said, what I presently have in hand, which is legal nonconforming that goes in perpetuity for the time being.
Exactly.
And so that could theoretically be removed from the table if necessary. For some reason, that created challenges, which I don't want to do that. The meeting room space is the conditional use for the assembly piece for the community resource. And I just would hate to see that community resource removed. And that's why we sort of came forward with that request and sort of brought them forward together.
However, just to be clear, I mean, the legal non-conforming use could continue if you did not bring this CUP application. But when we grant this CUP application, if we do, we're granting a CUP application to allow the educational facility use for the whole building, not just the meeting space. This CUP is encompassing, my understanding, both uses, the public assembly and the rest of the building. So in a way, the legal non-conforming use goes away and it is now a legal use, like within our current zoning code, because you made this point during the planning commission. I attended all the meetings. If they were about to deny that this meeting space could stay available to the public, I think you were prepared to say, you know what? I'm actually not going to apply for renewal of the CUP because I can't risk the whole building, because the whole building is being brought into scope now, not just the public assembly.
That's fair, but I just want to make sure that the point of that was understood, and the fact that it was just in an effort to be forthright and to sort of come forward. But they are sort of separate and distinct to a certain degree. I feel like in my head, but that might correct me.
In the last 15 years, there hasn't been any changing use of the facilities.
No, sir.
All right, thank you.
I'll put words in your mouth. You are working to be a cooperative neighbor to comply with the city's ordinances. They got us to this point.
That's 100% true.
Terrific. Thank you, John. Appreciate you being here. With that, I'd like to ask for council's consideration of item 6.1. Actually, before consideration, I'll remind we have a letter from Dr. Ramey that was submitted via email, I think earlier today. And later this afternoon, received an email also from Tina Miller, and I forwarded to the clerk. I received about 5:45, so I wasn't able to get it to everyone, but it will also be a part of the minutes for our consideration.
A couple thoughts on this one. Currently, it hasn't been recent practice to put the 15-year stipulation on things, is my understanding. So I think that should be taken into account. Additionally, I think it's important to consider the fact that it's been the same use for 15 years. This is not some new use that's really coming about or any change to the status quo. So I just would like to submit those two things for discussion purposes.
When I say for consideration, it would be appropriate for someone on council to make a motion of some sort. You have staff's recommendation before you.
I'll make a motion to approve the staff recommendation. I mean, I can read it out. Should I read it out?
I don't think it's necessary. It's as printed is your motion.
As printed.
Well, you included the thing.
No.
No.
No, yeah, the planning commission has the 15 years. The staff recommendation does not. I move to approve the staff recommendation that does not have the 15 years.
Very good. There's a motion on the floor.
Second.
Have a second. Further discussion. Mr. Smith.
Satisfy curiosity. If the permit is denied, then what happens? It just goes back to a legal non-conforming use?
Yes.
Okay.
He still has his non-conforming use building.
Right. Okay.
Any further discussion? Any public discussion?
If
Here-
it's denied in 15 years, if we put a 15-year limit on it, then Then what happens?
For the non-conforming use, assuming it has not been discontinued for a 2-year period, it would continue on.
Even though we're
Yes.
legalizing it, and we are conforming the use in this CUP.
You are correct. I was thinking of an approval of just of the assembly. So then you would have a conditional use permit, and then yes, it would be denied, and then it could be used for general office work, which is permitted as a matter of right.
Except by
wouldn't-
except by
wouldn't-
Washington. and
Wouldn't fit into the educational.
So they would
institution.
have to move out in
Category.
15 years.
There would be nothing in 15 years from stopping some, let's say the lease ended, or not 15 years, let's say, whenever the lease is up. Somebody from using, somebody else from coming into the office that does not have, that has the use not under the CUP, right? Like the by right use.
Sure.
Yeah.
Sure. Yeah, he could lease it to anybody who has the by right use. He could lease it to another educational institute.
Right.
It's not tied to Washington necessarily. It's tied to the use.
Could be used for office space, could be used, yeah.
Any further discussion? If not, ask for a roll call vote. Mr. Betts.
Aye.
Mr. Alligood.
Aye.
Mr. Ziegler.
Aye.
Mr. Smith.
Aye.
Ms. Strawn.
Aye.
Ms. Alexander. Motion carries unanimously. Thank you all very much. Item 6.2, public hearing for consideration to allow a portion of the Rockbridge Building at 9 through 17 South Main Street. And we still have 3 members of council who acknowledge a conflict of interest, but who are participating, acknowledging that conflict. Arnie, take it away.
Conditional use permit is requested to allow the educational facility, college, university use, and the public assembly use in the Rockbridge Building at 9 through 17 South Main Street, with the exception of the 2 retail spaces that will remain on the main level facing Main Street. Washington Lee University will be the tenant occupying the remainder of the building. Administrative offices for W&L are proposed throughout the building, and the applicant is seeking the public assembly use in case the tenant utilizes the lower level for a larger meeting or gathering space. Rockbridge Building will contain an expanded lower level basement with direct access to McCrum's parking lot, a mid-level with direct access to South Main Street, and a 3rd level. The applicant specifically requests the following 3 items. 1, that the public assembly use and the educational facility, college, university use be allowed on the lower level, the lower basement level. Number 2, that the educational facility, college, university use be allowed on the mid-level located behind the retail spaces that will continue to front on South Main Street. And last, that the educational facility, college, university use be allowed on the upper level. Staff crafted the recommended conditions to reflect the proposed uses as follows. Number 1, the entire upper and lower levels and that portion of the main level at the rear of the building and located behind the storefronts facing Main Street may be utilized for the administrative facilities related to the educational facility, college, university use. Number 2, that only the lower level of the building may be utilized for the public assembly purposes. And number 3, that the storefronts facing Main Street are not subject to this conditional use permit, because retail space is a by right use in the C1 zoning district. During the initial planning commission public hearing, the planning commission requested floor plans be provided to better understand the layout of the Rockbridge Building and where the proposed uses would be located. That is why you have floor plans included in your packet this evening. It was discovered during the old courthouse CUP that we just discussed that the new definition for the educational facility, college, university use now includes administrative facilities. And the impact of this change is that university affiliated administrative offices located in C1 zoning district are now a conditional use. Public assembly use, in contrast, was already a conditional use in the C1 zoning district, although it was called an assembly hall prior to 2017. Staff would like to point out that any conditions imposed or approved must be reasonable and address an impact expected from the proposed use. Additionally, conditions developed to address an expected impact must be proportionally related to the impacts resulting from that use. Last, it should be mentioned that were the administrative office use in the building not related to a university, that office use would be a by right use and not subject to a conditional use permit. Planning Commission held a public hearings, not one, but public hearings on on August 22nd, and again on September 26th, and approved a motion to recommend approval of the requested conditional use permit, 3 staff recommended conditions. Minutes from those meetings are included in your packet beginning on page 31 of your overall packet. The appendix contains comments from the public beginning on page 45. And you also received an email earlier today from Patrick Ramey with additional comments and apparently even further comments later on after 5 o'clock from Tina Miller. Happy to answer any questions.
What was, you may or may not have an answer to this question. What was this building used for prior to this?
I know that HLF had office space, I believe, in the main level towards the back, and that's the only time I'd ever been in the building. So the applicant may be better able to explain what was even on the 3rd floor, for example, or even in the basement.
Okay, thanks.
John, would you like to come and respond to that?
Council again, John Adamson. So on the lower level, it was primarily storage. Some interesting trivia that used to be the city morgue at one point in time. There was evidence of that. There was also a hood from an old grill station down there as well. On the main level is retail, and we're proposing it maintain retail, street facing. And then the upper level was mostly office space. There were 2 fairly tired residential situations up there, but they were pretty tired towards the front of the building, but most of it was office space.
Was there occupancy in the office space and residential areas?
No occupancy in the residential when I acquired. And there was some office occupancy, HLF, and some other independents still in there as well.
How long have you held this, if you don't mind?
Don't hold me to this exactly. I feel like it was acquired in 22. Again, I'd have to look at that.
Thank you.
Yeah. And Ladles and Lennon's and Shenandoah Attic were the retail occupants downstairs, correct?
Right.
Thanks, John. Other questions for Arnie? Hearing none, I would like to open the public hearing. I have 2 folks that have signed up, but again, welcome anyone who would like to speak. I'd like to invite Tina Miller to speak first and Michael Perry on deck. Welcome, Tina.
Thank you very much. My name is Tina Miller. I appreciate all the effort and time that you all put into your positions here. And I am not a city resident. I live in Natural Bridge, but I do have a business on Main Street. And first of all, I want to make sure that I think W&L and Virginia Military Institute are crucial in Lexington's success. We are so blessed to have them within the community, and by no means am I suggesting that they are not a huge asset to the community. And no matter the institution, be it W&L, VMI, SU, or Mountain Gateway, these concerns would still be applicable. I believe there's reasonable grounds to deny a CUP for W&L through Adamson to take over a substantial amount of more downtown Lexington space. In particular, W&L is encroaching more into downtown, would have adverse impacts on the character of the neighborhood. Instead of having a diverse mix of businesses within the downtown, there will be a disproportional amount of W&L using business and potential housing space. The potential space for housing to live, work, and play downtown will be lost. And also, as far as retail and just the great mix of the community, like a shopping center, a downtown works in the same way, is that you need a critical mass of retail and restaurants to be a destination that people wish to go downtown. Otherwise, it may become there's nothing down there and people don't want to come if it's just boarded up or, office spaces, et cetera. You need those restaurants, you need the retail so that people are like, hey, let's go downtown. It's a very slippery slope. When it started with Washington Lee taking Nelson Street, I grew up in this area. So I lived here pretty much my whole life. The Nelson Street, if you went down where the dorms and Lexington Test Center were, those used to be houses and buildings down that way. the courthouse and many other buildings, for example, the print shop, the Nelson Street space that used to be the old Press Brown's building, that's now become the office and post office, the Hopkins House, which used to have counseling in it, I'm sure I'm let's see, some of the places that were Preston Street. Oh, that could have been there, the W&L. I think it's a fraternity house or such. But in other words, there's lots of things that have affected. And again, I do say that W&L is an amazing asset to the town, but there has been a lot of institutional creep that has happened into our area. And I think it's really important for us to consider that we want to keep this a viable place, to live, work, and play. W&L's campus master plan encouraged W&L to keep any new construction with its current campus boundaries. Essentially, I feel like this is new construction because the buildings have been gutted and the back of the Rockbridge building is completely tore off. Hence it, if you've seen it, if you've gone back there, hence it will be all new except for primarily the shell. And one of the things that's been brought up is, well, isn't it great that it's being brought up to code? And I would say, having brought up some, done renovations on building, that's part of code itself. Like you have to, if you do renovations to that extent, you're going to have to bring it up to code. It's not just a nicety that would be great, because it is great, but it is something that's required. The Lexington Comprehensive Plan, by the way, there are 2 strategies regarding W&L. And however, there are historic reasons that Mr. Glacier explained why expansion is limited. And there's only, like I said, 2 strategies listed, but maintaining the cultural and historical context of the community along with the local character and identity. W&L's encroaching into Lexington does not support that, and maintain a separation between institutional zone and the business zone. Clearly, this would be violated as well. And once this is allowed, there's no going back. There's been a huge amount of works over the last 4 decades to revitalize downtown Lexington. I was on the LDDA board, I was on the Main Street Lexington board, and by no means did I put tremendous amount of work in, but there were so many hundreds of people who have put work in over the years. To jeopardize that is a big concern. There's also concerns about further competition to existing merchants and restaurateurs. For example, the Hillel House definitely competes with area restaurants. So that came into place. That's another building that was then added in. Another issue with this is parking. We already heard this evening, parking is a huge issue that we're already having in downtown. And if you're a business owner, we hear it constantly. And I will tell you, if people come downtown and they cannot find a place to park, even if they can park a block away, they're going to get frustrated. And we know for a fact, as evidenced even this evening, that there are people who are parking there all day long. And during our parking meeting the other week, one of the things, the biggest complaint was all the parking that is taking place from the W&L courthouse, the employees there. So that is a huge concern. And when I had ladles and linens, I was in that building, and that whole building was completely full, including the basement, which is where we had our offices. There was 10 parking spaces right there. So those 10 parking spaces, which were personal, they were private, they belonged to the building, those are going to be removed, is my understanding. Now, there could be a parking study or something that's going to be presented to house all these parkings, but my understanding is there's 30+ offices that are going to be added into the Rockbridge building. And again, that's a lot of parking. And I can say, again, certainly people will get frustrated. They will not come downtown anymore. And following up, one of the things that has been mentioned is that, there hasn't been anyone who would be willing to do the things that are happening as far as the renovation, which I think is great. It's grand, but there could be housing, there could be other things. And one of the things as far as is the tax base, which I know doesn't affect the property taxes, but what does affect is if you had engineers, if you had architects, like what was in there when I was in the building, you would also have their taxes. So you will lose all of that if it becomes Washington Lee, because you won't be getting the business license taxes. You won't necessarily, let's say somebody had a business that they generated sales tax. You will not have that sales tax. You will not have any of those taxes that might be there if there were businesses related. And The other thing that was said is, well, it's nice that somebody's fixing up this building. I agree. It's great, to have things like the Press Brown building. But I will say, if you look in towns like Lynchburg, there's many developers putting in condominiums, doing really great things in these other communities as well. So it's not that it has to be this way and it has to be that way. Once again, I will bring up when I was in that building with ladles and linens, it was full. There was no vacancy. So, I mean, came and went, but essentially there was very little vacancy. Another comment is, won't we love the increased foot traffic as a business in downtown Lexington? Yeah, always. We always want foot traffic. It's huge. It's our number one big thing. But the one thing that no one's really thought of, it's the same foot traffic you're going to have in and out daily. Now you would say, well, what about the offices that you're saying were there already in the Rockbridge building? Well, the thing about those offices is if you're an engineer, an architect, some other businesses, and you have clients coming to see you, then you're going to get new clients, possibly people from the county, possibly, people from out of state. Who knows where those customers are going to come? So it's not going to necessarily be the same people over and over. And a big thing too is any acquisition of square footage in downtown by W&L reduces the supply of square footage for businesses and residents, which could potentially drive up rent prices. If W&L was taking up the spaces outside of downtown, this wouldn't be nearly a problem or any problem at all. But I think the big crux of the matter here is our special, wonderful, hallmark-like downtown that I think that this will adversely affect. Again, I want to say that I truly believe W&L and VMI are incredible to have in our community. I just think that it's important. When I think about when I was a kid, the amount of space, again, down Nelson Street for VMI, which I know that we can't do anything about because it's state, but down, North Main Street, there were houses, there were businesses down North Main Street. Those are now all gone, and we've got athletic centers and things like that. Now you look at Nelson Street, where we've got dormitories, we've got the Lentha Center. Again, these are great assets to the community, and they're a little far out, but now as we're encroaching more and more, this creep is very disconcerting to myself as a concerned citizen who grew up in the area, as well as having been a board member of LDDA and MSL, and also a current Main Street business owner. I truly appreciate your time, and I would ask you to deny this UP. Thank you.
Thank you, Tina. Michael Perry. As Michael's approaching, is there anyone else who would like to speak to this topic this evening? Mr. Ravenhorst, anyone else? Welcome.
Good evening, Council. The first thing I want to address is the conflict of interest that three council members do have on this topic, and whether it legally is to the letter of the law that you have to recuse yourself or not. The mere appearance of a conflict of interest, I think, is enough to cause you to recuse yourself. I spoke before the Planning Commission regarding this topic of continued expansion of W&L into the town of Lexington and its encroachment of downtown. W&L is part of the fabric of this city, just as VMI is also. Lexington has hosted both these institutions for over 250 years in the case of W&L. We are proud of our institutions of higher learning, and Lexington would not be the same without them. However, W&L in particular has continued to expand into downtown of Lexington, leasing offices from developer and W&L alum John Adamson. Mr. Adamson, to his credit, has taken derelict and rundown properties and invested major capital into their preservation and future use. He is to be commended for that and the manner in which he maintains his properties. However, the continuing creep of W&L into Lexington is detrimental to the healthy future of our downtown, which should be filled with spaces for commerce, dining, and entertainment, run by small business owners. After attending the Lexington Planning Commission meeting regarding this very topic, it was apparent that there had been no approval of this whole use before Mr. Adamson decided to invest probably millions of dollars into the renovation of these buildings. And And I think that's a problem for the planning commission to try to play catch up. It seems that the planning commission should be perhaps called the reaction commission rather than the planning commission, because it doesn't seem like there was a lot of planning going into the decision. The decision was already in motion. Washington and Lee has billions of dollars in endowments. They have significant unused land on their campus. WNL should not be allowed to occupy more prime real estate in Lexington. Instead of having a showplace city hall in Lexington, we have a bland old school building that is now needing significant investments for updates and upgrades. Instead of city hall occupying appropriately located in historically significant, the courthouse in the historic jail structure, we have a WNL accounting and finance office. City council was likely short-sighted when they allowed the sale of the courthouse to slip into the hands of a private developer, which in turn put it into the hands of a private institution, WNL. The Press Brown Building, another historic structure in town that most recently housed retail space for small businesses, is now a WNL conference room and offices and their IT department. They also have a mailing and parcel center that is used for their exclusive use. And that business used to go to small shipping companies here in town. And now it's all housed at WNL, and those people are now cut out of that business. Again, it was previously mentioned, Hillel House was allowed to be constructed, and with their cafe has taken away a number, business from coffee shops, small cafes, etc. in town. There are continued rumors that there will be a WNL bookstore renting one of the newly created retail spaces controlled by Mr. Adamson. At the Planning Commission meeting, Mr. Adamson denied that rumor and said that there would be there had been no discussions with WNL in that regard. I'm asking if Mr. Adamson can please go on record this evening stating that there will be no WNL bookstore going into one of his downtown retail spaces, that he will pledge to keep the retail spaces available for small businesses at a fair rent. WNL offices will add to the parking woes of downtown, as we have heard this evening. Valuable parking spaces will be used by employees rather than customers coming to downtown that need a place to park, to shop, and visit the local shops and restaurants. In addition, it's been stated that there is removal of actual parking spaces behind the building as a result of the construction. So right there, we're already at a net loss of parking downtown. WNL can afford higher rents than any other small business or any small business here in Lexington. This will cause small business owners to have a much more difficult time affording their rents, as increases will occur overall by other landlords. Many people wishing to open a small business in Lexington will be discouraged to do so because of the greater rental expense. The other issue I have with this project is that there was housing in the Rockbridge building, and was potential to have more housing in the Rockbridge building. This council has gone on record as saying that affordable housing is necessary in Lexington. As a matter of fact, we went through a whole exercise about new property affordable residential development with the Echelon project. How can you reconcile saying that, yes, we need more housing, and at the same time, we are allowing housing to be taken away in the city? The last thing we want in our town is to turn into another Blacksburg, because the major educational institution has gobbled up the prime real estate in our town. To keep our charm and diversity of businesses downtown, I urge you to deny the conditional use permit. Thank you.
Thank you, Michael. Thanks for being with us this evening. Is there anyone else who would like to speak to this topic? Mr. Ravenhorst.
H.E. Ravenhorst, not a resident of the city. I work in the city. My office is currently at 19 South Main, which is immediately adjacent to Mr. Adamson's property. About 55 years ago, I started working in an office in it was the McCrum building at the time. It's the Rockbridge building now, but anyway, that building. And for numerous decades after that, worked there in an office. And it's true, at a couple of peak moments during those years, the place was kind of full. But it was boom or bust, and it was mostly bust. So that building has been largely empty. And at this point, or at the point before Mr. Adamson started the work, none of the offices were really suitable for 21st century occupancy, the things one would expect for that. So he's invested a considerable amount of money in it, as the other speakers have pointed out. And in order to do that in this community, one needs to find someone that has deep pockets. Mr. Adamson may have deep pockets, but Washington and Lee clearly has even deeper pockets, I'm thinking. Meanwhile, the city is it's a hotbed of Presbyterianism. What can I say? People will not put anything into their buildings in this town unless the building department forces them to. And even then, it doesn't necessarily happen. The projects that Mr. Adamson has done were done in a first-rate fashion. So I would encourage you to not prohibit him from continuing that. Clearly, the other speakers have raised some issues that you'll have to weigh, and I won't try to address those. But I will point out that the work Mr. Adamson does is very good and wouldn't get done otherwise, and will make the whole community safer. A few years before I was born, in 1949, I think there was a fire in the Rockbridge building that burned the top floor off of that. And if a fire like that broke out at this point, in all likelihood, it would take the whole block, which would include my office. But he'll be going back with sprinklers and things like that that'll preserve that. And it's true, just preserving the shell, but I don't see a feasible way that shell would be filled otherwise. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Ravenhorst. Thank you for the history lesson. I hadn't thought about McCrum's for a couple of years, but remember that from my youth. Is there anyone else who would like to speak to this item 6.2? Hearing the dull roar of the air handlers at 8:38, I'd like to close the public hearing and offer Mr. Adamson a chance to respond to any of the observations, where he went to school or otherwise.
Mr. Mayor, members of council, John Adamson again. One just point of order, just to correct the record. I am not a graduate of Washington and Lee. I would love to say that I was. I'm my only immediate sibling that didn't go to school in Lexington. Went to school just up the street at JMU, but have probably spent more time in Lexington than all of my siblings combined and all my other family members that went to WNL and BM. I hear their points, and I want you to know that I love Lexington. I'm a resident of Richmond. I've got 3 beautiful girls that are in school there. My parents are aging in there. My wife's parents are aging in there. There's probably a time in the future that I would love to come and be a resident in Lexington. And I have that aspiration. But right now I'm sort of grounded where my youngest, my 8th grader's in school for a few more years anyway. In the meantime, I spend a lot of my days here in Lexington. A couple just points that I want to make, and I'll be brief because of the hour. We're real estate investors. We own some buildings here in town, and Washington Lee is one of our tenants, but certainly not our only tenant. We house Carillion Healthcare. We house Lewis Gale with HCA. We house independent therapists and doctors and small business owners in certain buildings. And so, again, I just want to point out that WNL is not our only tenant and our only game. And Lexington is not the only market that we own property in, for the record as well. Regarding taxes, we've kind of addressed this, but I just want to hit on one basic point. Our budget for renovations almost always is more than what we pay for a property, which thereby increases the building assessment, thereby increasing the tax base in general, which increases revenue for the city. And I just wanted to make that statement. Preserving retail space is certainly a priority of ours. We certainly learned this at 115 West Nelson. And although at the time we did the project, we thought it was a by right and we thought we were doing what we're supposed to do and didn't have any, and Arnie can speak to that, but did not have any idea that we were not working in accordance with ordinance. That had been a vacant storefront for at least 15 years and was not an asset for that block. And I didn't originally buy the building. Another group based here in Lexington bought the building and proceeded to do some work and gutted the entire building, got kind of over their skis and called me and said, "We need some help. Would you be willing to take it over?" And I said, "Sure. I love buildings and I'd be happy to." So that is not a building that I sought out. That building sort of found me and then I ran with it. But I just want to make sure that that's clear, that I didn't take it from its, present state that was useful and turn it into what it is. I'm jumping around on my notes here, so forgive me. So preserving retail space is a priority, and we have made sure that very programmatically that we are maintaining retail space on Main Street for the Rockbridge building, since that's the subject of tonight's discussion. And we've tried to right size it so it's approximately 1,800 square feet, and it will be new, updated, safe, with all modern life safety, accessibility, etc. We believe that that's a good thing. Our work is protecting downtown historic buildings in addition to the buildings we work on. So it's not only the building that we're working on that's safer, it's the building on either side of us and the building on the other side of it. So if there is a fire that breaks out, Southern End not too many years ago, that could potentially take out a block. The one thing that makes Lexington uniquely Lexington is its historic building fabric. And we believe that we are helping protect that. Lastly, having occupants in the building, the reason we're here tonight is because they received their check, not from HCA, not from Carillion, not from Cornerstone Bank, but Washington and Lee. But otherwise, they're the same working professionals that work in lots of other industries, but we're just here because they get their money from Washington and Lee. But increasing foot traffic with professionals that are going to the coffee shops, that are eating in restaurants, that are shopping in the stores, I feel is good for Lexington. And I think that working collaboratively and working together and sitting down, and I'm hugely accessible, we can talk about these parking issues. And a lot of instances, people that work in these buildings, this building in particular, will be as close to a parking lot that's controlled by the school as if they worked on campus. So to me, it seems logical that if these individuals working collaboratively with the institution were asked to park in parking lots that are either private or owned by and controlled by the school and walk to the building, that seems like a logical sort of partnership. So I think that there's some solvable things here working together with open dialogue that we can solve some of these things. So I will leave the rest there for the time being, but happy to answer any questions.
Members of council have any questions for the applicant?
How many people do you expect to be in the offices, like occupancy wise, under your current plan?
I don't have an exact number, but I would say there is a small net increase over what would have potentially been in the building previously, because the old building had smaller spaces and this is going to have some more open spaces, but it will be a small increase, but I don't know, I have a precise number for you.
Okay, thanks.
Ms. Alexander.
Do you know what departments would be leaving campus and coming to these spaces, or anyone in particular?
I should know that, and I don't know that right off. So forgive me for not being able to speak specifically to the department, but working professionals that are administrative based as opposed to teachers, deans, that sort of thing.
Is this temporary use or considered more of a permanent
I would
situation?
think any lease situation is temporary. And I do want to just touch on one other thing, and this might have been a misstep on my part. The institution did not ask for assembly or meeting space in the lower level. At the time that this application was coming forward in conjunction with the courthouse, it just seemed like there were some big open spaces down there that might be some community resources. So I alone said, I'll just put that in as a possibility. And maybe there's some more stringent building codes that require a little more sprinkling or this or that to have safe spaces. That was not an ask of theirs. That was me just trying to be flexible, thinking that it might be beneficial for community stakeholders.
Mr. Ziegler.
Question about you mentioning how you are prioritizing retail for the two existing retail locations. And of course, you presented to the planning commission about maybe an adjacent project that might double the number of retail locations in that building, but focused on the Rockbridge building because that's what we're here for. Are we codifying in any way that they will remain retail? Because you made a good point, I think, that the people on the second floor office space, the reason we're here is because where they derive their paycheck from. If they were lawyers, if they were accountants working for themselves, 35, 40 accountants could work on that second floor and we'd be fine. But what I also want to make and try to understand is, could an accounting firm or a law firm by right go on the first floor in the C1? Yes.
That's an affirmative, but that's
That
not
is a-
my spirit.
Exactly. And I want to be clear, I'm not sure about what may be proffered. We can't ask, so I won't. But that's where I'm trying to understand how you're prioritizing retail, and we're hearing that. But the fact of the matter is, it could be office space on the first floor if you rent to anyone else other than Washington and Lee, or VMI, or SVU, or Mountain Gateway. And then we would lose retail on Main Street because that's already happening in Lexington. Office space might occur, and that's by right. Anywhere in the C1, it could be an office. It could be an office that's open 1 day a week. It could be an office that's open 0 days a week on Main Street. So I'm hearing you say that retail is our priority. And I think everyone has heard you say retail is our priority, especially the businesses that are there that are part of the fabric of Lexington also. But I really hope that that is your intent, because the fact of the matter is our zoning code says it doesn't need to be retail.
All true and fair, and I hopefully have a track record. And when you say something publicly and you state an intent, and then you reverse course, it makes it really hard to come back. So it is absolutely our intent to maintain retail in those spaces, because it's important not only to needs, but also to the user, because we heard loud and clear at 115 that it's nice to have more public engagement.
As far as and again, you don't know who exactly was going to occupy that space, but I felt like we had heard before it might have been advancement operations. Not sure if that's the case. Have you heard that any of those folks?
Yes, but then there's potentially some
Okay.
changes.
I
and
just-
that's the reason I've just been quiet about
That's
it.
fine.
because
I
it-
didn't
it's
know
sort
if we were,
it's been
if
ebbing and
Lexington was
flowing.
potentially gaining a house on Henry Street that is a residence that's currently being used for office space. And if that was going to be available for housing again in Lexington, a house.
I have heard the same sort of thing, and I think that that's fair and reasonable, but I don't speak for that.
Is it accurate that parking will be reduced from the parking that was available before? Is that accurate?
is it accurate that we've put an addition on the back and there's some parking immediately behind the building?
That will no
Um,
longer be there.
That is no longer there. That is an accurate statement. It's also accurate that behind the grand building that there's a portion of property that's owned all the way to Jefferson Street that the city leases out to other people that's privately owned. So the parking back there is pretty complicated in general, but I'm feeling like with a collaborative approach here, that we can solve the parking concerns and net increase parking, if that makes any sense, by reducing the number of people parking in those spaces.
Mr. Alligood.
One of the ideas that had been floated a year or so ago was a parking garage in the area, the parking lot behind the Rock Ridge building there. I'm not suggesting that we move forward on that. I'm just throwing that out, that that's been discussed. One of the main points that puts us here tonight and puts you here and puts the issue before the Planning Commission was the question about W&L. And the term W&L creep has been often repeated. The situation about what is W&L creep is not well defined. Our city manager recently at a planning commission shared the payment in lieu of taxes document that shows that it's really not a tax issue. In particular, when you're leasing things, you're the owner and not W&L is not. But so what is W&L creep? What is it that concerns enough people to cause this to be an issue of discussion here? And so I would suggest at some point we need to define what it is about W&L creep that bothers us. And I'm not suggesting that it bothers me, but I am suggesting that the community would probably have input or would like to have input on better defining the question of what is the creep. If, as Mr. Ziegler suggested, you put anybody else except W&L on the second floor of your building, then we wouldn't be here discussing this. And there, it would be a by right thing. And so I would like to, at some point, have this council hold public discussions somehow, maybe work sessions or something, so that the planning commission would better understand what the question of creep really means, what it is that concerns us about the creep. I think it's an important matter that needs public discussion here in this town, because otherwise we're letting it stay in a vague state and you're having to deal with it, and it's unfortunate. And so, and I want to say, I want to give you a pat on the back. I like what you're doing with the investment in the town. And I think that you're definitely a credit to the town for what you've done. And the question again is, why W&L? And so, but I appreciate it's a business arrangement, but that's the issue that brings us here actually.
One question for Mr. Adamson, about parking, and certainly you're not going to solve our parking challenges downtown. I get that. But in a recent CUP that we approved on Lewis Street for a small school, which Lewis Street's in a residential neighborhood, but in that CUP that we approved, we limited the amount of the employees where they could park, saying that they had to park on their property. And we limited the number of employees that could park actually on a city street, on a public street. And so have you considered at all, as you request the CUP, that you take the same action to say that you would encourage or you would require the tenants or a percentage of your tenants to park where they may already have parking where they could go? Because you just made the good point. A lot maybe on W&L's campus might be just as close as somewhere else. And so just since we've got a history of doing that with a CUP that we did on Lewis Street, dealing with parking, that really allayed the concerns, not all the concerns of the neighborhood, but That was a big thing about parking. It is everywhere. Just didn't know if you've thought about that, to work with a potential tenant that you might be able to help by demonstrating that to the other business owners downtown that you're asking them to park where they can park.
So, I understand there's a new parking commission that's sort of recently formed to explore this issue and talk about it. My general thought on that would be, as evidenced with the payments in lieu of taxes and other instances, that the university wants to be a good steward and wants to be a good partner here. And so I might take the personal approach that let's open the door for that conversation within the parking commission, and let's see if we can proactively solve it working collaboratively, as opposed to sort of the ordinances and I think that we can get where we all want to go in a happy, thoughtful way. Now, can I promise there won't be a bad actor or two? No, but can we largely influence and encourage and point out what the opportunities are? I think the answer is yes, for sure.
I have a question for staff, and I may have an additional question for Mr. Adamson. Is it possible to put like a fourth condition on here? Like to add a condition about educational facility, college, university use, parking would be, if tenants for that would be, parking would basically be on that facility's campus. Is that something that can be done at this stage?
The reason I would be hesitant for that, in the C1 zoning district, there are no parking requirements, off-street parking requirements. So with that just as background, what is the impact? Do we know what this specific impact is? How many spaces? We know that they're going to be, perhaps, I think there was just a few more people over what was in the building prior to that. So the impact in my mind is perhaps small, because only a few more people may be occupying that building over what was in there in past years. And then again, just to reiterate, the parking, there's no off-street parking requirement. So I would recommend that if you go down the road of crafting a condition, that you be very specific as to what the expected impact is and how.
I'll be honest. I'll be upfront about this. One of my main concerns is, this is a really hard decision. There's a lot of weighing of interest. And when I look at the parking situation, there's going to be more people, there's going to be less spaces, and we're already having problems with parking downtown. That's why I'm trying to see what our options are, because that, I think it's a tough decision, and that for me may be the deciding factor. But that's why I was asking.
And that's kind of why I was asking the applicant, because
Yeah.
the city's in an odd position to put that in the CUP.
Right,
Yeah.
right, because whose responsibility? We don't require
That's
parking.
why the
on
applicant
C1.
could do it.
But that is something we would consider, and
Well,
If the applicant.
Mr. Betts, I would suggest that, the folks that spoke earlier were concerned about the enforcement of our current parking. And so the 2-hour parking in front of Lex Running Shop is people parking there for the entire day. If they're working in this building, I'm sure they're not going to be, they may join the crew that tries to move their car every 2 hours. There is ample parking in our community for folks that go to Lex Running Shop and buy shoes and walk from the parking deck or the Roy Smith parking lot to downtown. So when we've looked at studies in the past, we don't have a problem with the amount of parking yet. This could add to it, but our problem right now is enforcement. When folks come and park their car the entire day in front of the Robert E. Lee or Gin Hotel.
I do understand
Yeah.
that. I'm just saying we already have a parking enforcement problem, and then we'll have more people that will be parking in the area with less spaces than previously existed.
Could bring in more revenue.
It's a challenging decision. It's challenging.
But on parking for Arnie, parking, we don't have a parking requirement in C1, and so that makes parking a city problem, not the building owner problem. Is that correct?
As I mentioned at the planning commission when this came up, parking is basically a utility downtown where we provide parking. We provide it in parking lots, some publicly owned parking lots. We provide it on street. So again, in the C1 zoning district, there's not an off-street parking requirement. That's why I'm hesitant to sort of recommend going forward with any sort of stipulation that's parking specific.
Right. And that's why I had the question to the applicant rather than staff.
Gotcha.
Thank you. Other questions from council? Any other comments, Mr. Adamson? Are you good for now?
Just make a statement to answer Mr. Ziegler's comment. I will absolutely have a conversation with all tenants in the building, retail and office users, and discuss parking and work with the commission to figure out where all the parking lots are. And let's have those conversations. But I really want to just reiterate that I'd like to do it collaboratively and get rid of sort of the us versus them, and give us an opportunity to work it out. And then I think that that'll bring out the best in everybody. That's my hope. So thank you for your time.
Thanks, sir. Heard from staff, held our public hearing, heard from the applicant. Any discussion, comments, observations, or would you like to consider this item?
I did. Would point out under the conditional use permits in part D, adequate public services, including streets and other traffic ways, utility, police, and fire protection are or reasonably will be available to support the proposed use. And I will say I do have concerns about that.
I'll say I work downtown. I'm down there usually 5 days a week. I don't always park downtown, but I pass plenty of parking spaces. I meet people for lunch a lot of times, and if they drive, they don't have problems with parking. I know you can't always park right in front of the building that you want to go to, but within a block, I can find parking. And when this came up with Planning Commission, I was talking to one of the business owners, and he told me, I'm not worried about parking. I'm worried about foot traffic. It's all in favor of having these upper stories occupied. And I know this, I liked hearing that the upper stories are now considered prime real estate, because I know for Main Street, we've been trying to work with some of these property owners to develop those upper stories, and they are reluctant to make the investment in that because they don't see the turnaround. It would be nice to have more housing downtown. However, from what we've seen with all the new residential units downtown, it's not affordable housing. I have no problems, with any type of housing. We need all types, but it is definitely market rate to luxury type housing. So I don't think we should fool ourselves that if we leave this space empty, that it's going to soon become affordable housing. And I just see it as a good thing for downtown, bringing in more foot traffic for everybody, for all the other businesses. It makes a big difference being downtown versus 2 blocks over on campus. Once you get on campus, you stay on campus for lunch, and if you have to buy something, you go online and buy something. But I see the people, particularly I walk by the Press Brown building quite a bit. When the IT folks moved in, I see them downtown eating lunch, almost different people every day. And I see them walking through the shops and things like that. It makes a difference to actually work downtown.
And I just will point out one other concern I have is that we're losing 2 housing units. I mean, that's not going to solve Lexington's housing problem, but I do have some level of concern about that too. But I will say again, I think this is a challenging decision and a weighing of interest. So I understand everybody. It's a tough vote.
Mr. Smith.
I asked the city attorney this question a little earlier, and I think it's worth mentioning. If it's purely hypothetical and definitely not a suggestion, but if this permit is denied and those offices that are proposed are no longer would not be available for university administrative office use, could someone set up an LLC, set up a contract with the university, and perform the exact same work in those offices?
Potentially.
Pay the contracting fees, so some taxes are through BPOL are taken care of. But I'm making an argument to see how trying to parse apart the fact that it's university use versus just regular office use, I cannot get around, and it's university use. And the fact that it's WNL is a distraction. It's university use. It could be WNL, it could be VMI, it could be Mountain Gateway, it could be SVU. So I don't know if you know what I'm asking?
I do, and
Jeremy, grab the microphone so folks can hear you.
difficulty here is the purpose of zoning is to focus on land use, not land user. And so the land use here is essentially an office use, as I understand it. And so when you're focusing on the user, you're getting distracted from the use, which is the focus of zoning, to manage and develop particular uses of land. And so to your point, if the exact same use, let's take it away from the contracting scenario you've got, because that might still be doing the educational function, the educational use. But what if they were going to put a billing function in there, and WNL was, and instead Carillion went in there. Mr. Adamson said he had Carillion as a customer, and Carillion put a billing function in there. The exact same use, you possibly lose the retail space in that instance. And there's no more intensity, there's no more impact on the community, but that is something that is permitted as a matter of right. And that's why for zoning, I encourage you to focus on the use and not the user.
Yeah, that's to my point. And you said it a whole lot better than I did. The fact of the matter, it's C1, it's office space by right. There are no parking requirements. And I'm trying to focus on the facts on the paper that are in front of me that allow me to participate in the transaction fairly objectively and in the public interest. Our comp plan says we need more people downtown. Main Street says we need more people downtown. These offices will put more people downtown. I don't care how they're used. So if they're used effectively and efficiently and do the things that the city wants to have happen in our downtown to improve our downtown economy and improve our buildings downtown, I have a real hard time denying this permit. There's so many ways for it, and there are against it. How we feel about WNL is one thing, but the use is what is in front of us. Thank you.
One of the things about our comp plan, I mean, we talk about the economy, we talk about our historic resources, we talk about land use, right? That's our comp plan. That's our comprehensive plan. And this one small section speaking about our downtown center, I'll read it in the record. The city should embrace downtown investment while ensuring preservation of historic structures and carefully guarding the character and architectural quality. Economic investment may come from more fully using second and third floor spaces above front commercial as offices and residences. That's where I was hitting on. We've got to make sure that those first floors remains retail. You've said it's a priority. You're a man of your word. It's got to stay retail, in my opinion. And I believe what we've learned from our fire chief at our work session a week ago or two about the lack of sprinkler systems downtown and the interconnectivity of our buildings downtown. And it's in our comp plan that our historic resources, our Main Street, our downtown buildings are irreplaceable and they should be preserved. And I think Mr. Adamson's attempting to preserve them by doing certain things. I struggle hearing from some business owners that maybe would prefer a different tenant upstairs, with the other business owners that say the same thing. I need people that will shop in my store and eat there. And tourists often don't come Tuesday mornings or Wednesday mornings. And they desperately would like people that are out. And they're afraid, actually, because they understand a little bit of the public sentiment. They're afraid to speak out and come here to say, Washington Lee employees that spend money in my store, I welcome them. I don't want them to feel unwelcome. And so I'm struggling because I wouldn't want to pit some business owners against other business owners that just happen to disagree on this topic. But the point that I made, that the first floor could be office space, and Mr. Adamson is committing to that to be retail, we wouldn't even be here. He could rent the whole building to just, well, everything that's by right. It could be, and we would never have any foot traffic, wouldn't be any retail. So I think I'm going to support this. I think it's an enhancement to our downtown. It's an enhancement to the Rockbridge building. I can't ignore the improvements that are happening at the Grand building that you shared with the Planning Commission. You shared it in public that you may double to take 2 retail spaces and double it to 4. That will ultimately be great. That whole section of town will be very positive with it all being retail.
Thank you, Mr. Ziegler. The members of council, comments?
I think it's a tough decision.
I'll go ahead and make my comments now. As we all know, WNL is a major, somewhat of an industry, so to speak, in our community, and WNL provides the city with, and the whole community really, with valuable resources. There are too many to mention. John Adamson, the value you have added to our community in historic preservation and basic preservation of other buildings, the safety of those buildings, those things have been immeasurable, and we appreciate that. My decision is based on a case of finding a balance in the uses of our downtown, a downtown that is longing to maintain some vibrancy, energy, and bustling foot traffic. Years ago, when I was growing up, pretty much behind every door downtown was a business where the majority of the locals, which you don't really see here, but many of the locals would partake of what went on downtown, and as well as visitors who would come to Lexington to do business. There were businesses there. Fast forward to 2017, Main Street Lexington worked to find occupants for those second floor spaces, and they found that there were challenges having to do with safety, but they were looking for the possibilities of housing as well as small businesses. And our comp plan lends itself to in that direction. If this proposal included housing and public commercial spaces, I'd be all in. More offices for private use, I don't see as conducive to balancing our downtown efforts that we need to continue trying to make happen. I feel that this is, most likely going to be approved, but I also felt that my voting in a particular way is going to simply send a message that we as a city government, because we're responsible for this quite a bit, that we need to refocus our efforts on economic development of our downtown. If we don't, we could lose sight of other opportunities to find the best possible uses of the spaces completely. That's all I have to say.
Thank you, Ms. Alexander. Other members, council have anything want to add? Retract? Just kidding. For you students here this evening, it's usually not this exciting. And one thing for you to know is that as mayor, I do not have a vote unless it's a tie. I am merely a tiebreaker. I wanted to add a couple of observations from the comments I've heard this evening, and at least my perspective on this circumstance. And I'm grateful for the city attorney pointing out its use, not user, which I think is critical to evaluating this in the most appropriate way. Mr. Alligood said, hope we can have a public meeting and discuss what creep is. I've been pounding on the table about institutional creep for quite some time, and I personally define it as our friends at VMI have eradicated neighborhoods and businesses along North Main, as Tina mentioned earlier. Those are no longer homes, no longer businesses. They're gone and they're off the tax records. The complexion and fabric of our community is completely changed forever as the state has taken that property over. I'm really proud of this council. Within the past year, Washington and Lee wanted to take the triangle or quadrangle and make it fourth-year housing. It's zoned residential. It has residential homes that need to be maintained, and Washington and Lee happens to own every one of them. Because of the zoning, the use, the owner has to comply with that use, and this council said, sorry, we're not going to consider rezoning that property to allow it to be developed as fourth-year housing. That would have been additional creep by Washington and Lee University. I look at individuals, whether it be Mr. Adamson or other people that are sitting in here tonight that own buildings and property in downtown Lexington or have made the investment in buildings and making the investment, who they choose as their tenants is not as critical. Washington and Lee, who doesn't pay real estate taxes on their campus in bits and pieces, this is a good way for them to be a good neighbor. And a lot of people have said we've got too much of Washington and Lee downtown. For those of you who have a short memory, within the past 25 years, this city council and Main Street Lexington, which was LDDA at the time, was irate with Washington and Lee, who was building a moat and putting everything on their campus, and lobbied Washington and Lee to be a better neighbor and integrate in the community. They've begun doing that, and now we find ourselves saying, we want you to integrate, but on our terms. And I'm not sure that's the best situation. I'm glad that they are no longer a moat. I frequently, as I'm downtown walking around, allegedly working, I get stopped by people and visitors, and they'll suggest I'm a professor. And I said, please don't insult the professionals of Washington and Lee and VMI. I'm a financial advisor. I don't work at Washington and Lee. But professionals walking down our street, whether they work at Washington and Lee or somewhere else, aren't labeled. They're just professionals walking the street. And more foot traffic, as David pointed out, and thank you for reading into the record, our comp plan, we want people downtown. We want them shopping in Walkabout Outfitters and getting new shoes at Lex Running Store. My grave concern, and the thing that's not come up this evening, is the Rockbridge building was actually in reasonably poor shape, but it was actually in great shape compared to some other buildings in our community. We have property owners who, as Mr. Ravenhorst pointed out, are of a strong Presbyterian background and don't spend a lot of money on capital improving their business or their buildings, that is. And I'm more concerned about those buildings that the eaves are starting to crumble and fall. Press Brown's got in the position where Cocoa Mill had to leave because there was raw sewage coming through the ceiling. So that small business that had been housed in the building that's been fluffed and buffed couldn't operate there, in horrible conditions for the folks that continue to rent there. So I remain concerned about focusing on all the businesses, and I'm grateful for any individual. And I think this council and this city government needs to continue to support anyone who wants to make a capital improvement in buildings that are going to help and maintain and improve the architectural integrity and the charming downtown history that we have. In 2016, when I ran for mayor, one of the questions that was asked to me is, describe Lexington at the end of your term. What is your vision for the city? And as I was reading through this and preparing for this meeting, it caught my funny bone. And I responded to that question in this fashion. Lexington has rich history and culture. It's important to me that we remain authentic. For the past 50 years, the Southern Inn restaurant has been operated by a George. George Maharis first, and now George Ugie. He's closed his doors, but you can rent it, I understand, for special occasions. Encourage you to call Mandy and make arrangements. I wish it was open and we had more foot traffic and more people eating downtown. You have almost always been able to order fried chicken, but the offering and the experience has changed over the years. But the Southern Inn is a Lexington institution. Thus, at the end of my term as mayor, I hope to find kind, supportive people working together to grow, prosper, and rise up against a threat to our cohesive way of living. I love that we're not, I love that we are in a tither about parking on Main Street. Deja vu all over again. And the potholes all over town, we've improved most of those, and not drug influences, metal detectors in our schools, and crime and drive-by shootings in our city. I don't claim to have all the answers, and when I'm elected, I look forward to input from all citizens so each voice can be heard, whether you support this conditional use permit or oppose it. This guidance with the support of City Council will provide a roadmap for the city manager to set goals, diligently work towards achieving these goals so that we can live the kind, respectful, cohesive way of life we all expect. Collaboration with friends and neighbors working together. That's my vision for Lexington. And I see it demonstrated tonight as this council wrestles with how to approach this conditional use permit. And Mr. Adamson works to invest capital in our city, and many of the faces in here that are made a serious financial and personal commitment to the growth and betterment of our community. So I may not get to vote tonight, but know that I want to see good things for our community as in 2016, I still share that vision. So at this point, I'll ask for council's further discussion or consideration.
I move to approve conditional use permit number CUP 2024-05 to allow portions of the Rockbridge Building, tax map number 23-1-72A, to be used for administrative facilities related to the educational facility, college/university use, and as a public assembly with the 3 staff recommended conditions.
Second.
Have a motion and a second. Any further discussion? If not, call for a roll call vote. Mr. Betts?
I vote no.
Ms. Strawn?
Aye.
Mr. Smith?
Aye.
Mr. Alligood?
No.
Mr. Ziegler?
Aye.
Ms. Alexander? It is a tie, and I vote aye for approval of the conditional use permit. So the motion carries 4-3. The next item on our agenda is consideration of the minutes. Item 7.1, they were provided to you in your packet prior to the meeting. Unless there are any objection, we will approve those as presented. They are approved. The next item is citizens' remarks and comments. This time, as read earlier, didn't see anyone that had signed up, but is there anyone who would like to speak to council this evening? Not seeing anyone who would like to speak to council this evening. We'll progress and move on to our consent agenda. And there are 2 items for your consideration.
I'll make a motion to approve this, the consent agenda.
Thank you, Mr. Betts.
Second.
We have a motion, a second, a roll call vote. Mr. Alligood.
Aye.
Mr. Betts.
Aye.
Mr. Ziegler.
Aye.
Ms. Strawn.
Aye.
Mr. Smith.
Aye.
Ms. Alexander.
Aye.
Motion carries unanimously. Thank you all very much. Not aware of any unfinished business. We can move right into reports and commissions. Blue Ridge Resource Authority, Mr. Smith.
Nothing to report.
Thank you, sir. Main Street Lexington, Mr. Smith.
I'm pulling up an email. We're looking forward to downtown trick or treating. Big annual event. A change from our Lex Lotto. We're switching to Shop Small sweepstakes. People will visit businesses and get their cards stamped to win a downtown shopping spree. There's a new requirement that a purchase is necessary to get your card stamped. Through the
Could you repeat that? For the downtown lotto, a purchase?
It's the small Shop Small sweepstakes.
Great. Purchase required.
Purchase required.
Thank you.
Working with the WNL Student Consulting Group in an attempt to measure downtown foot traffic and just the usual slate of holiday events coming up, candlelight processional and Christmas parade. Any questions?
Thank you, Mr. Smith. No questions. Maury Service Authority, Mr. Alligood.
No report other than to say the MSA Maury Service Authority Board meeting will occur next Tuesday at 5 o'clock at the Osage Lane address.
Thank you, sir. Planning Commission, Ms. Strawn.
We continued our discussion of cottage housing, and then at our next meeting next Thursday, we'll take up the issue of the property we purchased, the city purchased for the cemetery. That'll involve rezoning and CUP to allow those properties to be added on to the cemetery. That's all I have.
Thank you, ma'am. Any questions? Regional Tourism Board, Mr. Betts.
Yes, sir. There was an RFP released by Regional Tourism for marketing and strategic planning services. The RFP was issued on October 9th, 2024. Interested offers should submit their intent to bid by October 23rd, 2024. Questions and inquiries are due by November 6th, 2024. Questions and inquiries added as addendum to RFP are due by November 20th, 2024. Proposals are due by 12 p.m. Eastern on December 4th, 2024. Offer invitation to interview will be December 11th, 2024. Tourism interviews selected firms December 16th through 20th, 2024. Contract finalization will occur January 2025. Questions about this process can be directed to Lexington and Rockbridge Area Tourism Executive Director Cheryl Wagner. We are still in the process of lease negotiations for the current visitor center space. My understanding is we will be drafting our own proposed lease, which we will discuss with the lessor for the current space tourism is occupying. It's also my understanding that the lease we will be drafting will be with the help of legal counsel. Library funding was voted on by Rockbridge County and it was approved. So I think we can all be glad to hear that the library will be operating as it was. And next year, the visitor center hours of operation may increase. This will be something we will discuss during next year's budget process.
Any questions for Mr. Betts? It's do you all have a committee looking at the lease or city manager or?
So we have me and Christina Ramsey are on the lease committee, and we met with Cheryl.
Okay.
And I think
Did we find an individual at Brightspeed to work with?
I don't exactly know the answer to that, but I will say that's why I think we're going to draft the lease and then, and then try to, work it out with them,
Well, my concern is that there's no one to send it to other than a PO box or something of that nature.
Fair enough.
And if that's the case, please let me know.
Absolutely.
I think we have some avenues of pressure points at Brightspeed.
Sounds
So
good. Thank you, sir.
thank you. Raro, Mr. Ziegler.
No report.
Threshold, Ms. Alexander.
Threshold met on September 25th. And we continued discussion about the windshield survey, which we should have a return on that sometime in January. We also continued our discussion of incorporating the substantially substandard dwellings in the area, as well as the dwellings that are complaint-driven issues from neighborhoods, as well as the windshield survey results, and incorporating all of that into a plan of action. That's all.
Very good. So you take a deep breath. I thought you were ready to roll, kind of like the good preacher. Very good. Very good. Thank you, Miss Alexander. For my reports, first, we'll make you aware that we have a few applications outstanding. I apologize for not bringing forward recommendations for threshold. Congratulations on soliciting at, I think, the candidates forum. We had Anna Crockett, Valerie Molinterno, and Molly McClure, who have all applied for threshold. I've just not reached out to them yet to discern their intentions and bring forward names, but I will do so as quickly as possible. Also wanted to report that city manager and Leslie and I all attended the Virginia Municipal League conference this past weekend. I'm proud to say we did some divide and conquer with some of the sessions, and everyone was good about attending sessions and learning. One of the big themes at the conference was AI, and what I drew from it was opportunity. It's an opportunity. Don't fear it. And a lot of the opportunities for utilizing AI to make city government more efficient, to assist with the clerk's work. There were discussions about how to use it for minutes, to have more robust minutes from that standpoint. And then some of the elected officials talked about their utilization for social media and others, which was fascinating. And I'm not sure I would recommend some of the things that were being advocated on social media. It's an interesting world, but it was a great conference, and look forward to sharing more about that with folks individually. With that, I will turn it over to the city manager. Oh, yes.
Is it possible, and if so, how could it be done is it possible to add a seat to threshold? Is there anything that would stop us from expanding the seats on there?
Look at the bylaws.
Yep. We can get the city manager to look at what that looks like and report back, but
I think the interest is great, and just want to look at all our options.
certainly. Great. Thank you, Nick.
Yes, sir.
Bylaws say 7 members.
7 members. Okay.
And that includes the liaisons.
I believe so.
We'll double check and get back on that. City manager.
Thank you, Mayor. I'll be very brief. Simply wanted to amplify the mayor's comments about the Virginia Municipal League, and then also add to it was one thing that Finance Director Jennifer Bell was presenting on Sunday afternoon to great acclaim, and just wanted to thank her for her drive to the conference for that presentation, which was very well received. Also wanted to recognize Lexington Fire Department for an excellent job on a fire, active structure fire on Walker on Monday. They were assisted by the departments of Buena Vista, Car Creek, Eppinger, and Natural Bridge. There were no serious injuries. One firefighter from Buena Vista was injured, but returned to the work scene after being checked out by EMS. And in light of that, not just because of Monday's structure fire, but because October is Fire Safety Month, wanted to encourage everyone to, as you change your clocks for daylight savings time, to change the batteries in all of your smoke detectors in your home. The best way to protect your family and your house from a fire is through a working smoke detector. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Any questions for the city manager? City attorney, Mr. Carroll.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Very briefly, you will recall making a recommendation for BZA appointments at least since the last meeting. We have submitted those pleadings, and the judge has signed off on those appointments. So those are now in effect, and I just wanted to report back on that. One of the things that I'll be bringing and working with Tom to bring forward, no urgency to it within the next couple of months. One of the changes by the General Assembly this year affected electronic meetings and your ability to use virtual meetings for occasionally for individual members. One of those changes is that they now must be approved annually, like as a policy matter. So I want to update it to mirror the law and then get it in front of you so you can begin the process of annual approvals. And Tom and I had a constructive meeting with folks at the county on the MSA documents that we've been looking at. And so hopefully those will be moving forward here in short order, but it's very constructive and collaborative meeting, and we've got some good ideas. That's all I wanted to report. Any questions? Happy to answer.
Thank you, sir. Any questions for the attorney? Very good. The new business, we moved up to the beginning, and I'm sure Patrick is enjoying the full moon that's out this evening. I encourage you all to look to the sky for the October full moon. Thank you, Janie, for the going the extra mile in our community and the goodies that you brought for us this evening. And unless there's any other business to come before council, we stand adjourned. Have a great evening and a better weekend.